everyone. Jamie Sumner, Chief Analyst of Sea Freedom Brew. For this week's webcast, we wanted to review over the second estimate of the fourth quarter 2016 GDP release that came out last week. And as you probably know, the fourth quarter estimate came out at 1.9%, the same as the advance release back in January. So there's no change in the overall rate of the economic growth. However, there were some subtle changes inside the underlying numbers, the different components that contribute to this overall growth. So we'll take a couple of minutes and review each of these components. As you know, there's four main components inside the GDP. We have consumer spending, investments, government spending, and then the net of the exports imports. And what we like to do when we see additional releases of the GDP is compare the changes between the two releases. So as you can see, last time the GDP was released, which would be the advance release, which is the first release of the fourth quarter, you can see that consumer segment contributed about 170 basis points to the overall GDP growth of 1.9. Now, when we look at the second release, you can see that contribution increased to 2.05. So we had a positive benefit from the consumer segment by about 35 basis points. So that's pretty substantial. When you look at the two main components of that consumer, which would be the overall goods versus services, we saw that goods contributed an additional 12 basis points and services 23. So the biggest component in there was that services contributing that additional 23 basis points. So that's a positive as we look into the first quarter. Now we look at the investment portion, and this is both business investments as well as residential fixed investments. We can see that this actually went down. We had the advanced estimate came out at 1.67. The second release, 1.45. Now, inside of this, there wasn't any real big indicator as far as which item kind of dropped significantly. Everything pretty much came down a little bit, which then contributed to the overall 22 basis point decline in here. If we look at that inventories number, which tends to be pretty volatile, that only came down about 4 basis points. So it wasn't a big contributor to this 22 basis point reduction. But we can see that's almost offsetting completely the benefit we saw inside the consumer. So then we come down to the government portion inside of GDP, and we can see also that deteriorated a little bit between the two estimates that came out. The advance coming in at 21 basis points as a contribution to the overall GDP growth, and then the second release coming in at 6 basis points. So pulling off about 15 basis points of growth inside of the government sector. Now that kind of pull off came from the state and municipal spending throughout that quarter. And that was down pretty much about 28 basis points. We saw the different makeup inside of the federal spending. So we see the state and local government kind of pulling off on their spending inside the second release in here. And then we had net exports imports staying exactly the same at negative 1.7% as a contribution, so detracting from that overall growth. But between the two releases, there was no change in there. So overall, we see a positive impact on the consumer side, which is what we anticipated because of the revised retail sales numbers that were coming out being revised up. So that was a positive. But on the business side, we're seeing a little bit of softening there. And then inside of that, government spending also a little bit of softening. We had a lot of numbers that came out last week. And this is just one of them, so we wanted to review it. Next week, we'll take another look at a couple of the items that came out inside the economic news last week. So everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week.